Hello, everybody. Just wanted to bring a thought to you from 1 Peter chapter 3. That's the section we're going to be studying Wednesday night in our Zoom Bible study. And 1 Peter chapter 3 presents an interesting passage. It starts off with, "In the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands." And that always gets a discussion going. It always gets a good conversation going. It continues and says, "So that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives." Let me first speak to the culture of the time. When Peter was writing this letter, it was during a time in the world when women and slaves were very much viewed as property, right? It was the Hellenistic culture, and so they just were less than. That's how the culture viewed them. However, Jesus taught very differently and countercultural to the culture of his day. Jesus taught to respect women. He taught women directly. He spoke to women, the woman at the well. He defended women, the woman caught in adultery. He elevated women to a position that they hadn't experienced in that culture. He even included women as disciples. There's women even included in his genealogy. So he didn't go along with that. He didn't condone that. In fact, he was leading a new way in his kingdom, right? Paul even encouraged in his letter to the Ephesians that husbands and wives should be mutually submissive to one another. So we have this Hellenistic culture where women and slaves were viewed as property. And then we have the teachings of Jesus where he's pushing against that culture and trying to bring in a new mindset and a new way of viewing everybody. Everybody's on the same playing field. Everybody deserves to be treated equally. So he challenged it. Challenged how we treated women, how we talked about women. But he was also at the same time, and I think this is important for us to understand passages like this, Jesus at the same time was teaching us how to live in a culture and still maintain our witness for the good news of Jesus. So the goal wasn't necessarily to come in and to rebel and totally circumvent the culture. The goal was to come in and in grace and in love find ways to win people to Christ. And if you can win people to Christ, culture changes. You can't change the culture before you change the people, right? So Jesus came in and began to do heart changes and heart transformations in the people, which would lead to cultural transformation. And that's a vital truth for us today in our world. We would love to see culture go a different direction than we see it currently going. But we can't just come in and change culture from the top down. We have to change people. We have to reach people's hearts. Jesus has to get hold of people and change their hearts. And when people change and when hearts change, culture can begin to change. So when Peter is talking to the wives and the husbands that he's writing this letter to, Peter's also trying to teach them how to live within a culture where they feel like aliens and strangers. You have to keep that in mind. That who is he talking to? He's talking to aliens and strangers, people who don't feel comfortable in this place anymore. Women who have come to know Christ, who no longer feel like they should be treated as property. Husbands who were kind of stuck in the middle that have yet to come to know Christ. Like there's all these different scenarios. So when Peter says to the wives, "In the same way, you wives be submissive to your husbands," he's not saying the way that you are viewed as property is right. He's saying if you want to win your husband for Christ, now is probably not the time for you to rebel. Now is probably the time for you to submit. Not that submission is in any way a sign of inferiority, but that in submitting, you might actually be able to then win your husband to Jesus. So he's looking at submission not as a sign of inferiority, but as a sign or as a tool or a method in which they might be able to win their spouse. And so look at it in that way when you read the first part of chapter 3, but then don't forget to read verse 7. Because in verse 7 it says, "You husbands in the same way live with your wives in an understanding way." So he's talking to unbelieving husbands. And he's saying, You shouldn't beat them. You shouldn't treat them disrespectfully. You should treat them still with respect and honor. If you really do believe that they're a weaker person, build them up to make them stronger. And show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life so that your prayers will not be hindered. I think that's important. The way you treat your spouse will impact your prayer life. We can talk about that more on Wednesday night. But in this, I think we need to also remember the key to this, I believe, is verses 8 and 9, where he says, to sum it up, all of you be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. For you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. So don't return evil for evil or insult for insult, but give a blessing. Be harmonious, be sympathetic, be brotherly, be kind-hearted. That's the ultimate goal, right? So wives, if you're submitting to your husbands, be harmonious, be brotherly, be kind-hearted. Husbands, submit to your wives. Husbands, treat your wives with dignity, respect. Build her up as if you do share in the same grace of God, because you do. But let's all be harmonious and humble and kind-hearted, and let's not insult one another. So it's an interesting passage, and I think there's a lot for us to get out of this passage, and we can spend some more time talking about it Wednesday night, 7 o'clock on Zoom. We'll have our gathering. We hope to see you all there. I think it's going to be a great conversation. So hope to see you soon.